Hi, guys. Welcome to the latest episode of the Line and the Liverbird podcast. We've switched time zones around for this episode after some technical difficulties while recording this. So, today we're not going to talk about the Premier League per se. We know the new season is just a few days away, but we're talking about something which is a part of the Premier League. That's the Fantasy Premier League, the FPL, where you have millions of players from all around the world creating their own fantasy squads and trying to outscore each other. It's fun, it's a little tactical. You got to predict, and obviously there is an element of luck in it. I suck at this game. I'm just putting this out right at the start. But Rohit seems to do a lot better than me, or at least I hope he does. So yeah, Rohit, take it away.
I actually don't. I suck at it as bad as you. But this time because we thought of doing this episode and also creating an FPL league and a community around it for our podcast, I did a little bit of basic kind of data manipulation to try and look at what can be done if you kind of want to play it seriously, and that's what we'll be talking about today, right? And then before I dive in, I have to acknowledge, the data that I got from fplanalytics.com. They're very kind to, allow folks to download the data and play around with it and come up with, whatever insights they can, right? So the overall goal for today for me is, to kind of see what some strategies might be to create a team, right? And then before that, I just want to talk about what the restrictions are when you're making a team, right? You get a budget of £100 million, and with that budget you've got to select about 15 players, I think. And one of the main constraints is you can't have more than 3 players from a single team, right? Okay, that being said, what are some basic strategies, for scoring and, getting points in the Fantasy Premier League? So, number one is, of course, player performance, right? The better your players perform, the more the points you accrue. The fixtures also have a role to play because, if you have an easy run of fixtures, your players will obviously, play better, score more goals, have more clean sheets, and you'll accumulate more points. It's also important to get a good balance of the squad because uh, certain positions are better at accruing points for you, accumulating points for you than others, and we'll talk about this. Certain positions give you better bang for your buck, and in the same kind of in the same kind of vein, the formation is also important because again, certain positions give you bang for your buck. Something that's often ignored that I used to ignore a lot is having a pretty strong bench, right? Because what I used to do is spend all of my money in the first 11, and I just used to have these random people who probably won't even get a game in the bench, and that always comes down to haunt you because sometimes your players are injured, they don't perform well, you need to have a good enough bench to substitute, because another rule in FPL is you only get one substitution a week, which you can add up to 5 substitutions if you don't take those up. And of course there are some other ones like captaincy. Who do you make the captain? There's some wild cards and injuries and so on and so forth. So quite a few things to consider here, and given all of these various variables and metrics, I thought of doing a little bit of data analysis to try and find what an ideal mixture of players would be for the FPL, right? I also, next kind of wanted to talk about what the important attributes are in terms of scoring points for each of the positions that you have to fill up in your team, right? So for the goalkeepers, if the goalkeeper makes a lot of saves, keeps clean sheets, and can save penalties, they'll get a lot of points. The make saves part is kind of an interesting insight, right? So obviously the goalkeeper has to be a good shot stopper, but it also helps if the defense in front of the goalkeeper is not that great. So if they're conceding a lot of shots and goal, and the goalkeeper is good and the goalkeeper is saving those shots, the goalkeeper accrues a lot of points. And we'll take a look at some of these goalkeepers who've done really well, very surprisingly. For the defenders, it's also pretty straightforward. If they keep clean sheets, they get a lot of points, and they also get points for scoring goals and assists. Now, the interesting thing about defenders scoring goals and assisting is they actually get more points than the forwards for each goal that they score and each assist that they make. So very obvious strategy here would be, get good defenders who also contribute towards scoring goals and getting assists and so on and so forth, right? And some very obvious examples come to mind, right? Van Dijk scores a lot of goals and gets a lot of assists and so on and so forth. Midfield is a very crucial position because they get points for scoring goals and assisting more than what forwards do, less than defenders, but still higher than forwards. But they also make points when you keep clean sheets, right? So there's two ways they can make score points for you in the FPL. The forward line is pretty straightforward. If you score a goal and assist, you get points, nothing for clean sheets, right? So that's
I
the
just want
basic
to
thing. Yeah, go ahead.
bring one interesting facet in regarding the formations and the players.
Yeah.
We discussed this, is that a lot of the forwards in the Premier League are not considered forwards, they're considered as midfielders.
Yeah.
So one prime example is Mohamed Salah. He's not counted as a forward, he's rather counted as a midfielder. So I believe his goals and assists do count for more than those, like
Yes.
maybe from a Darwin Núñez or an Erling Haaland.
Yep. That's a very good point, right? Only the center forwards are considered to be forwards, and somebody like a Salah or even a Cole Palmer or Saka, these guys scored a lot of goals, get a lot of assists. They actually accrue more points than if they were classified as a forward or a center forward. That's an interesting quirk of this system that people should try to utilize, right?
Exploit.
Yep, exactly. So now, I'd like to show, basic slide. This is of the data that I got off the website I mentioned. This is very basic data science, a Pareto chart of, who were the players last year who got the most points. And if we look at this chart, some things are very obvious, right? Palmer, the highest goal and assist getter last year, has the highest points, followed closely by the likes of Foden, Watkins, Saka, Haaland, Son, and Mohamed Salah. These are the usual suspects, right? The best players in the Premier League who performed the best last year. So, not too many interesting insights if you look at the guys who are at the very top, but there's some interesting insights if you go further down the list. Somebody like Mateta of Crystal Palace, who had a really breakthrough year last year, scoring a lot of goals. He is on this list. And then there are also players like Solanke, Isak, Bruno Fernandes, Rice on this list as well. So
and Ben White.
Yeah, Ben White is there as well. Interestingly, I think he obviously had a good season. Didn't play for England because of the rift he had with Southgate, but he had a very good season and he got a lot of points.
Arsenal have got, I think, two centre backs in this lineup, in this list. It's Saliba and Ben White, which is very very interesting for people who will be setting up teams this season, because obviously you need good defenders who get you points. And Arsenal seem to be the team with that.
Yeah. And on top of that, we just talked about it, right? These guys are not only good at shutting out oppositions, because I think Arsenal conceded the least amount of goals. So obviously their defenders will make a lot of points. But White, especially, he sets up assists, he scores goals, so those get you a lot of points. So Arsenal defenders, definitely go get them if you have the budget. The next kind of thing that I want to talk about in this next slide is something a little kind of more interesting, because what I did was I basically divided the points that the players got last season by their cost for this season. So it's basically a points per cost. This gives you an idea of who are the bargain buys in terms of the points scored last season. So interestingly, the top name that comes up in this list, points per cost list, is actually Jordan Pickford, who was the goalkeeper of Everton. I was extremely surprised when I saw this, right? But when I look at the criteria, it makes sense. Pickford is a good shot stopper. Everton defense is very leaky, so they concede a lot of shots, and Pickford saves quite a few of them, right? And so he's at the very top. I want to talk about Pickford a little bit with you, because we know Pickford was England's first choice goalkeeper. Southgate picked him, and a lot of people, don't like the fact that he was picked, including me. I thought there was some better, I thought there were some better options out there, but it goes to show how much we know and how much more, an actual professional like Southgate knows, no matter how much we criticize him. So what do you think about the Pickford aspect?
Yeah, so we both, I don't think we both are big fans of Pickford being England's number one. But then obviously this just proves your point that how
Mhm.
much do we know about analytics and football management? Maybe it's
Yeah.
something else that obviously Southgate and his team used to look at. Of course, Southgate's not the manager anymore. We'll talk about Lee Carsley sometime, maybe on another day.
Mhm.
But yeah, so Pickford, I think, gets a lot of points because the Everton defense allows quite a few shots in, and he does save shots. It's not like he doesn't save them,
Yeah,
but
good
I
shot
think the
stopper.
joke has been running that he's got short hands and he's like a Tyrannosaurus Rex or something. But it was surprising to see that he is the one who's on the top of the chart of points per price.
Yep, yep.
I would have expected some other name to be there for sure. Of course, that chart that you've made has some really interesting insights. So we'll dig deeper into that right now. Like you've got a lot of very interesting goalkeepers. So you always think about going for an Allison or an Edison or even maybe one of the Arsenal keepers. Who's the Arsenal keeper now?
Raya.
Raya. You'd think you'd go with them, right? But I don't think any of them are there on the list.
I think
It's
only Raya is there, but towards the
Oh yeah,
end.
sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
I think
Raya is there at
the
the end.
top keepers, like you had pointed out, apart from Pickford, are Leno and Flecken. Leno of Fulham and
Yeah,
Flecken
Leno
of
is for
Brentford.
Fulham.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep, yep.
So that's really eye-opening, I would say.
Yep, yep, yep. Especially because these guys they don't cost that much and they're pretty good
Mm.
at shot stopping. So that's definitely something that people should be trying to utilize. And the list also has, like you correctly pointed out in the previous graph as well, it has White and Saliba,
Mm.
Arsenal defenders, and they're really good at defending, really good at obviously scoring
It
sometimes. And
also has
then
Gabriel
yep, there's Gabriel. So three of the defenders are on
and
there.
yeah,
Yeah,
White,
yeah, yeah.
Saliba, Gabriel, and Rice
Yep,
and
yep, yep,
Raya.
yep,
So
yep.
you've got almost five defensive because he's a keeper,
Yeah.
defensive players from Arsenal there on the list.
And this list also has Pedro Neto, who is basically going to be Chelsea's latest addition to the squad. I think Chelsea have like 75 people in the first team right now. So, that's something for Chelsea fans to look forward to. Maybe put Neto in your team and hope he does well.
Hope he doesn't get injured. So you've got
Yeah.
Neto and Reece James. So
Yes. We have Neto, Reece James, and Kunku. All of these guys are injury prone. Okay, so apart from that, there's some interesting insights there. The next thing I wanted to just see was, basically which are the teams, that accumulates the most amount of points. This one was supposed to be an obvious kind of
mm,
graph, right? You expect Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool to be on top. But what was interesting to me here was that Newcastle is
yeah.
actually fourth. They're above teams like Aston Villa, Tottenham, and Chelsea, who actually finished above Newcastle in the points table last year. But for this Fantasy Premier League, they are fourth, which goes to show that their players are actually performing really well, but some of the results are not translating into wins. So Newcastle players also might be good to buy
May,
this year, yeah,
yeah, it might
because
be Isaac Gordon and Guimaraes who pushed
exactly.
Newcastle to the fourth position here.
Exactly, exactly. So I think they have the squad. I think they just need a few results to go their way. So what is more interesting again is when I look at the next slide, which has basically the most number of points accumulated by these teams divided by the price of the players. Again, normalizing by the price. So basically trying to look for bargains. Number one is Arsenal, which is very interesting to me that they have players who have a decent price, not overpriced, but obviously they do really well. But number two is actually Everton in front of teams like Man City, right?
Yeah.
And apart from Everton, we also have Fulham and West Ham in the top five, right? So Everton, Fulham, and West Ham seem to have players who give you very high bang for your buck. And when I looked at the specific positions for Everton, of course, it's Pickford, the goalkeeper, as well as their defenders who get a lot of points. For Fulham, it's the same goalkeeper, which is Leno, and the defenders. For West Ham, it's the goalkeeper, Areola, and the midfielders, because I think West Ham have midfielders who score a lot of goals. Jared Bowen.
Jared Bowen. Yeah.
You've got Mohamed Kudus. You've got James Ward-Prowse, who's really good at setting up goals. And I think we'll talk about this. West Ham also made some very shrewd signings who might be good to pick in the FPL, including Somerville and Fulkrug. And for Newcastle, like you correctly pointed out, it's midfielders who get you the best bang for your buck. So your Anthony Gordons, Bruno Guimaraes, even Longstaff, I think, got some pretty good points. So, if you're looking for bargains, look at these teams: Everton, Fulham, West Ham, Newcastle, and look at these specific positions that we just talked about. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, because at the beginning I said your formation matters, and what positions you select your players in matters as well, obviously. This particular graph shows the points that were accumulated by the position that they played in. And the topmost position that gets you the most points is midfield, especially when you divide it by the cost of the player. Second is defense, third is goalkeeper, and the very last is the forward or the center forward. So basically, don't waste all your money on the center forward, because they don't give you best bang for your buck. Invest in good midfielders, because they accumulate the most amount of points, which makes sense because they get more points for scoring and assisting, as well as they get points if you shut out your opposition, right? And there are quite a few overpriced forwards there. Haaland being one. I wouldn't call him overpriced, but he's like exorbitantly priced, right? He does get you a lot of points, but he's also priced at, I think, 15 million, which is like insane. So this is an interesting insight. If I was making a team, I would use this to spend more money on midfielders and then try and be a little kind of smart with my money on the center forward, right? Okay, now I basically wanted to take a look at some specifics, right? Look at the top goalkeepers in terms of their performance, going by the points per cost, right? We of course talked about Pickford, Leno, Flecken. Onana, interestingly, is also up there, right? He had a mixed season last year, but I think Onana, again, he's a combination of where he's a decent shot stopper, pretty good, and the defense is leaky. So I think he'll be good this season as well. And
he said he said he's gonna perform even more this season. There was some quote of him out there, so I don't know how to take that. Maybe we need to
he's a
take it to the
confident
picture
guy.
slot.
Yeah, he's
You
a
need
confident guy.
confidence.
I
You have
agree.
to have confidence to play for a United, a Chelsea, or any club in the Premier League or the top division. So, full marks to him for saying that, and I guess it'll be interesting to see how he does.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in this list, we also have the usual suspects, right? The big team goalkeepers like Edison and Allison. And they get a lot of points, but because they cost a lot, they are not at the very top of the table when we're looking at points per cost. So probably pick, some of the bargain names there, Pickford, Leno, Onana, Flecken, and, form your team that way.
So, just to bring this up, for the goalkeepers, right, the price points are not that different or that high. For example, you've got Pickford right on top with 5 and Allison with a 5.5. So I just think that, if you really need to save a bit of money, you can make that change for the goalkeeper. But if you go for a solid name like an Edison or an Allison, also, you should be fine. Like the last option should be, I think, the last option should be that you're switching your keeper to get that 1 million or 500,000 to build your side. So
I agree with that. I agree with that, but I think the only thing is that these top teams, right? They also have good defenses. So those defenses, they don't
the bonus
concede that
points,
many shots, right? And
they
then
don't get the bonus points.
exactly,
Correct.
and then the other thing is they don't have to face too many shots, and then the opposition like barely has a shout in there. Like
They
against
follow.
City, Liverpool, like they get like one shot every game, and maybe not even on target. So that's an interesting thing that you have to choose here.
For Arsenal, maybe Liverpool and City give up a lot of shots, man. Now a lot.
Let's see what happens this year.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to defenders, right? Again, looking at the top defenders in terms of point per cost. We've talked about White and Saliba and Gabriel as well. They're on the list. But number 3 actually is Anderson, Crystal Palace. That was an interesting insight. He costs, quite less, only 4.5. And he got quite a few points last time. So he might be somebody you want to look at. Brathwaite from Everton is on there. And then you have Pedro Porro and so on and so forth, right?
So Brathwaite could be moving.
Exactly.
Like
I think
United want him. So
United want him. He's the young defender, very talented, and I think he might be a good pick going forward. Okay, now coming to the most important positions, as I talked about, is the midfield, right? So in this list, again, interesting, a table topper in terms of points per cost is actually Rice,
Nice.
because
Yeah.
his cost is pretty small. It's just 6.5 million pounds, but he gets a lot of points because he scores goals, he sets up assists, and then again, Arsenal being Arsenal, they don't concede too many goals, so he gets points for those as well. Rodri is actually next, and then Gordon. We talked about Anthony Gordon, who had a good year. Jared Bowen from West Ham. Any of these players, you do very well buying them. Interestingly, Palmer, who scored the highest number of points last season, he's not at the top of the list because he's had a big jump in his cost. Right,
Of
this
course.
year he's
Yeah.
cost almost 10.5 million pounds. So you can take him, but he costs quite a bit.
But he'll get
Uh,
you points.
he definitely will get you points, as will somebody who's not on this list. And I wanted to talk about that. Somebody who's not on this list because it's just looking at the top 20, 21 is Mohamed Salah, right?
Salah.
He
Yeah.
got a lot of points last year, around 200, but he costs a lot as well. I think 12.5 or 13 million, which is on the very highest spectrum. But I still think it's worth taking him, although he's not on like this bargain list because he was injured last season, right? So he didn't maximize his potential. And this season, to me, it looks like under Arne Slot, he's gonna really score a lot of goals, and with the vision that he's been showing in his passing, get a lot of assists as well. So I think that might be interesting. People should try to look at including Salah as well. Okay, moving on to the forwards, right? So this is, according to me, one of the more kind of overrated positions, especially when Haaland costs like 15 million. The top of this table is not Haaland, it's Ollie Watkins, because his cost is pretty low and he scored
And he had
the
a
highest
pretty
point. Yeah.
stellar season. Yeah.
Yes, he had an amazing season. So picking him, I don't think you can go wrong. And second on this list is actually Dom Solanke. And why he might be a great pick is because he's on his way to Tottenham. He already had a great season last year. He doesn't cost much, and in a better team, compared to Bournemouth, and also Postecoglou has Tottenham playing a very attacking style. You'd assume he'd have, a better season, or at least as good of a season as last year.
Yep.
Right. Of course, Julian Alvarez is off to Atletico Madrid. So although he's 3 on this list, of course, you can't pick him. Mateta is on this list that we talked about, right? And then, interestingly, there's somebody else on this list pretty high up, right? Much maligned, much criticized. It's Kai Havertz, right?
Wow.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, so he's like the other Pickford for us, but in the forward position.
Exactly,
But
exactly.
obviously he gives the returns that people want. I think his
Mhm.
cost per points and all is also pretty decent.
Mhm.
Points per cost, sorry.
Yep.
So yeah, and he looked pretty decent in preseason also. So who
Yeah.
knows? He might be a decent option for fans. But
Yes.
again, you need to know, or you need to plan it out as to how many Arsenal players do you want to put in your side. Because you're
Exactly.
talking about the defense and the keeper, and now
Mhm.
you've got Havertz and then Rice in the
Yes.
midfield. So some interesting choices need to be made.
Yep. And the other thing about Havertz is, I think he's bedded into the Arsenal team, and the Arsenal team is so dominant going forward. He will get a goal or assist every match, I think, if he stays fit, which he generally
Yeah.
does. So I think he might be a good pick. At 8 million, he's a pretty good buy. And then, of course, you have other players on there. I think Alexander Isaac of Newcastle would be pretty good. And there are a whole bunch of other players there. Um, uh,
Haaland's rock bottom, obviously, but that's because of his cost.
yeah. He scored a lot of points. He scored the second most points, but because he costs so much, that kind of gets cancelled out on this
Yeah.
particular list, which is interesting. Okay, so having covered all these major positions and talked about who might be a good bargain buy, and which teams you should be targeting to get players out of, there are some players who were not considered in this list. That's basically because they were either new transfers from external leagues, or they were part of promoted teams, or they were players who were injured last season, and then they didn't get too many games, so they didn't get too many points. And these players might be of really good value, right? Because they don't really have an extensive history. Their price is pretty low. And this is where I kind of wanted to point out some names. I have Christopher Nkunku of Chelsea right up there, because he only costs 6.5 million. And if he can stay fit, he's somebody who scores a lot of goals, who gives a lot of assists. Again, might be a really good bargain buy.
Yeah.
We touched upon Somerville, right? We were just talking about
Yeah.
Somerville at West Ham. Him and Fulkrug, who also is at West Ham now, I think those two can make a real big impact.
They
What
could
do you think
link up
about them?
really well. Yeah.
Mhm.
So Somerville was excellent for Leeds last season. I think they missed out on promotion. Uh, and him returning to the Premier League could be great uh, for FPL users, of course, because I
Yeah.
don't think it'll cost too much. And then if they link up pretty well, like a big man combination with a winger, and they've got Jared Bowen, they could get some really good points in some of the fixtures. Like
Yep.
that's
Yep.
gonna be, I think he's gonna be a pick for quite a few people, especially after the first week or so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think they should definitely be picked. Fulkrug and Somerville, both of these guys should get picked. I also put Calafiori there, of course, Arsenal
Because
defender.
Arsenal, yeah,
Yeah, and he costs only 6 million. So he's gonna start. He's good on the ball, so he'll get assists and goals. He's not going to be a bad pick. Then you have some other ones here. I put Matson there because I think he'll have a good season at Villa. There's Drewsbury Hall, who I hope has a good season at Chelsea.
I think you
I
just
don't
put
know.
him there because it's a Chelsea name.
That's also probably true. And then, some of the other names I have at the bottom of the list are teams that got promoted, like Fatawu and Mavididi from Leicester. They were the highest goal and assist getters last season for Leicester, apart from Drewsbury Hall, who was top of the list. You also have Adam Armstrong from Southampton and then
Yeah,
Chaplin from Ipswich. All of these guys, they cost next to nothing, right? And they'll play regularly. And if they give you a decent output, they might be a good option for the bench, right? So
yeah.
obviously the transfer window is still open. There might be new people getting added to this list, right? We never know. Chelsea are buying this kid called Samu Omorodion from Atletico Madrid. He might give us 20 goals. No, not really. But yeah, keep an eye out for new transfers, and then, you can put them in your team as well. Okay, this next graph or this next slide, I basically wanted to talk about, how the fixtures pan out for these major teams. I'm assuming most people's teams are going to have a lot of players from the top teams, right? City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Villa, Tottenham, so on and so forth. So what I did was I essentially, looked at all the fixtures for these teams and I assigned them a value between 1 and 3, one being a very tough fixture and 3 being an easy fixture. And
Right.
so if you look at this graph, right, the closer a particular month's number is to 3, the
Yeah,
easier is the fixture, essentially, right? So for example, if you look at the month of August, so when we are starting off the Premier League, the teams that have the easiest fixtures are Newcastle, because they're at a 3, Man United, and Liverpool. So if you're trying to make a team that will face easier oppositions, maybe include teams from Newcastle, Man United, and Liverpool to begin with, and then as and when you go along the season, you change it out based on this graph. You can see certain teams have easier months than others. And another interesting insight while looking at the data and making this graph was I realized December actually has the highest number of Premier League games.
yeah.
So if a particular team has an easy December, that means that their players will accumulate the most number of points. And I think the teams that have pretty easy Decembers are Arsenal, I think Tottenham, and Chelsea. Chelsea has a pretty easy December. I don't know if
You
Maresca
don't
and
know how it's
Chelsea
gonna
will.
work out. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if Maresca and Chelsea are going to get their act together by December, but
yeah,
maybe it's going to be interesting if people put a lot of players from Arsenal in December. That sounds like a pretty easy bet, right?
yeah, for sure.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, the last thing that I wanted to share, obviously, was like, invitation to everybody who watches this podcast and who's been on this journey with us to join our league. So I have the link to our Fantasy Premier League out here, and it's also going to be in the description of the video. So if you play Fantasy Premier
Yeah.
League, please join our league, be a part of the community. We'll follow each other's progress and we'll see if whatever I've been speaking actually makes any sense at all, or if all of that is bullshit, which it could very well be.
Yeah, yeah. You never know.
Right. So I've also put a snapshot of the team that we currently have as the Lion and Liverbird team, right? And I quickly run through the team and why I put this team here. I was going to say we, but it's just me.
No, all the work's been done by you. Yeah.
Okay, so looking at the team, right? I have Onana in goal because we saw that Onana is right up there in terms of points per cost, and also the fact that Man United have a pretty easy, August to start off with. In defense, I have Anderson, Crystal Palace. We saw, again, he was on the top of the list in terms of points per goal. Pedro Porro, somebody who gets a lot of assists. And I put Virgil van Dijk there because Liverpool have an easy August, and Van Dijk is really good. He scores a lot of goals. And I really have high hopes for Schlott, right? Especially the preseason that you guys have had. I think Liverpool will do well. And it's the same reason I spend money on Salah because I talked about it. I think he'll do really well. Saka, you got to put him there, on the top talents, and he'll give you goals, he'll give you assists. I put Gordon there because again, he did well last year. His price isn't that high, and Newcastle have an easy August. I put Bruno Fernandes there because of the Man United having an easy August, and of course, he also scores goals and sets up players. An interesting player that I had to put in there to balance the book was Andres Pereira. But if you look at the list of the midfielders, who get the most points per cost, he's actually up there. And again, he's somebody who scores goals, who sets up goals. So, I spent a lot of money on my midfield because I think, that's the smartest thing to do. I may be wrong. We'll see. And then I tried to be smart about the bargain forwards that we talked about. And Fulkrug is one of my forwards because we just talked about the fact that he's in a team that suits the system well. And I think with their new coach, they'll play a pretty attacking brand of football. They've also got really good midfielders. They've got Paqueta, they've got Kudus. On top of that, they've got Bowen, they've got Somerville. I think the West Ham team is shaping up to be a really good team. And I also put Solanke there because, of course, he had a great season last season, and he's going to be in Tottenham. And then, my bench is actually pretty decent. We've got Flecken, who we talked about. We've got Brathwaite, Shar, and Joao Pedro. All of these guys got really good points last season. So that's basically our team for now. I mean, we might change it while the season starts, but, please join our league and, we'll see who does well and, where we end up at the end of the season. Okay, so I think that was the last thing I wanted to talk about. Adeem, do you want to do the honors of leading us out?
Yeah. So again, please do join the league. I don't know if I'll be updating the squad, but Rohit will be for sure. And I just wanted to thank everybody who's been supporting us. Thanks for your likes, shares, and subscribes. I do know that a lot of people who do watch our episodes haven't subscribed to us, so please do subscribe to us. It really helps the algorithm. You know how things work with YouTube. You're gonna like the videos. Let us know in the comments if you like our shorts. We're on Instagram as well. Again, we thank you for all the support that you've given us so far, and we hope that you like our content. And with that said, take care, guys. Stay safe, and we'll catch you next week. Bye bye.
Yep. Bye bye.